Hi. Hello, Queecha. Oh, thanks for that raid. Do not know how annoying. Well, ads are inevitable, so they love you. Hey, Claude, how's it going? We are finishing up the Kids on Bikes flip through today. Y'all, I spent like 3 hours making spreadsheets for my players for the Kids on Bikes game that I'm going to be running next month, because I wanted everything to be nice and cohesive and where all of the information is in one place. And I also don't have this in PDF form, so I couldn't just send them the PDF. Thanks! I'm really liking doing these. It's forcing me to actually learn systems. You're nice and cohum. Thanks, Weasel. But we went through a lot of the basic character creation and mechanics last time. And I think that they made some pretty good changes from the first edition to this second edition. But we're gonna start with chapter 5, which is powered characters. Let's see. And we honestly made it about halfway through the book. Can we request table or should we bribe you with books? You can absolutely request systems. If you want to bribe me with books as well. I do have an egregious amount of TTRPGs. I will let you know, Claude. There is very likely I might already own the book. But this is, you can tell I got this book from Mox. Hydro. But no, I would be more than happy to do a little request as well. I have a couple. I'm going to be doing Mothership next month in preparation because I'm kind of trying to set them up where I'm doing table flips for games that I will be running in like the next month. So we're doing Kids on Bikes because we're obviously going to be running Kids on Bikes next month. And then we're going to be doing Mothership because I'm going to be running a Mothership game in November. And then I think we might do liminal spaces or liminal horror. I can't remember what it's called. It's like the actual liminal horror TTRPG because I want to run one of those modules. So I think we're going to run through that as well. But I don't imagine that a couple of those, I don't imagine the liminal horror would take me more than one session of going through. So I am totally down for doing any ones that you guys want. I've seen the system so many times. I've always been able to explain it very well to me. I hear good. I'm excited for Mothership. So I have the deluxe edition of Mothership. So I'll do it like a little unboxing so you guys can see what I have in the deluxe, but we will be going through like only the core rules. Just because I don't want to go through the module that I'm going to be running because I don't want to spoil anything for my players. But Dro, this system is actually really easy. If you guys, this is not like a mark or anything. It's just dried eyeliner. I use my hand as a palette. So this system is really easy. You have your 6 basic stats. You have grit, charm, brains, brawn, fight, and flight. And basically, you are assigning a die to each of those. So your highest stat will have a D20, your lowest stat will have a D4, and then you'll allocate the others to those. And then basically you say, hey, I want to make a check using my charm, and you'll justify why you're using your charm for that check. The GM will set a difficulty rating, and it's basically the same. 1 is really easy, 20 is really hard, and they will let you know, the GM will let the player know what the difficulty rating is. You roll to see, you will roll the corresponding die. So if I have a D12, if I have a D12 as my charm, I will roll that D12. I will add any bonuses if I have any bonuses to charm to that. And then whatever the result I get is my result. you get adversity tokens for failing rolls, and you can use those adversity tokens to bump up either yours or another player's roll by 1. As well as they have different abilities as well, but that's what the adversity tokens can be used for during a roll. It's very easy. It's very simple. The hand is a reusable palette. Heads up. Oh yeah, no, I've already unboxed it. But I'm just gonna. I put it all back, so I'm gonna kind of show what was in the box to begin with. But I have already unboxed it. Trust me. As soon as that motherfucker came, because I had been waiting for like 2 years for the Mothership Deluxe Edition. Yeah, it's a pretend unboxing. Interesting. Yeah, it's really good. So I'll go through. We'll just do a basic rundown of what we learned last time. So, let's see. So for creating a character, this game comes with a bunch of character tropes that you can use from. So it's basically a pre-gen. Let me see where they are. So we have a bunch of pre-gens here. There's a lot of pre-gens as well. There's a lot. And you can either use a pre-gen or you can create a character from scratch. The pre-gens are easy because they have all of the stats assigned already. Cheryl seems sad to me. I guess I need to go. Okay, no worries, Sydney. So aspiring wannabe. So you can choose a trope and you can just take that trope, or you can use the trope as like inspiration, which is nice. And then you can create a character from scratch. It's basically the same steps. You assign your stats. You pick what age you are. So children, teen, or adult, and each of those have their own benefits to them. So teen, I think, has a +1 to brawn and fight. And you also get the rebellious trait as a free little trait if you choose to have it. A 4-year-old aspiring wannabe. You can take off the game and learn the rules before. Yeah. But yeah, so it's really nice. There are a couple of mechanics. So when you fail a roll, you get an adversity token, and this follows very much the fail forward. What is it called? It's just they want you to fail forward. They want the failure to move the story forward. Even if you don't get what you want, a failure should still move the narrative forward. Mechanic. So failing a roll, you get an adversity token. The adversity token has 3 different things that it can do for you. So 1 is an adversity token can bump up a roll, and you can use an adversity token both on your own rolls and on your friends' rolls. And there also are strengths, which are basically like feats of some kind that will allow you to, if you use like 1 adversity token for a roll, it can bump up your party members roll by 2 instead of 1. So it kind of incentivizes you to help your party member instead of just yourself. Hey, Ad. Supposedly she's not mad at me, so I'm back. Adversity tokens also help you activate your strengths. So a lot of the strengths have a cost that is associated with your adversity token. So some strengths are like you need to spend 2 adversity tokens to activate this strength. And then you would just pay that cost. And the good thing is that you are going to be constantly accumulating the adversity tokens because you're going to be failing rolls. Adversity tokens. It's part of the mechanic for kids on bikes. And then the final mechanic for adversity tokens that you can use is you can use an adversity token to overcome a fear. So when you're going through character creation, you are going to establish a fear that your character has. And when you are faced with this fear, you are going to be making rolls with basically negative, what is it called? Basically, you're going to be subtracting from your total, depending on how severe the fear is at that point. But if you spend an adversity token and the GM will let you know how many adversity tokens you need to spend in order to overcome it, you can overcome that fear and, yeah, kind of like demerits. But yeah, adversity tokens is a really cool, it's a really cool mechanic in this game. It's basically kind of like advantage. It's kind of like an advantage, but gives you a little bit more than just doing like rolling with advantage or getting a +1. And then, so this is something else. This is something that it's called a lucky break, but I know it in other systems as like the die exploding. So when you roll the maximum number you can on a die during a stat check, you re-roll that. And then if you keep getting the maximum number, you just keep adding those up. I want to play an aspiring wannabe. How dare you make a toddler afraid of butterflies? Weasel, you monster. So lucky breaks is cool because if you are rolling a d4 and the GM's like, yeah, the difficulty is going to be a 7. Just because you're rolling a d4 doesn't mean that you're going to fail the roll. There is a possibility that you roll a 4 and then you roll a 3 and then you would match that difficulty. Insert joke about my die exploding here. I just picked this up, haven't read through it yet. I quite like it. It's very, I want to say it's pretty rules light. Your mom may have been involved. Oh, kill. We're gonna fight Ant. But yeah, lucky break is basically when you roll the maximum number on your die, you get to re-roll it and add that to the sum. So it kind of gives you the chance to succeed on a roll that you think that you might not be able to. Another mechanic that is in this game is tiered checks. So a tiered check means that there are varying levels of success. And it means that with a tiered check, you cannot fail the check. You just get bonuses the higher you roll. So this is like if you are in a library looking for information on something, you're going to find the information, but if you roll higher, you're going to get more information than if you were to roll lower. The con is that with tiered checks, because there is no chance of failure, you don't get an adversity token if you fail. But it is nice because you don't actually have to worry about failing the check. I always love a system. Yes. Love a system that uses degree. Yeah. Because it sucks when you're like, when you roll like a nat 20 on something and it's just like, and you don't really get anything good for that. Like you're like, oh, yeah, I rolled a nat 20 and they're like, okay, well you get what you wanted and that's it. Yeah, tier checks are great for exposition. And then this is actually, this is a change that they made from 1E to 2E for Kids on Bikes that I don't quite agree with. So there are planned actions and snap decisions. Planned actions are actions or stat checks that you're going to make where you have the time to plan them out. There's no sort of overbearing stressor that is going to make you possibly fail the roll or not be able to kind of come up with a plan with your party members to make the check. And in 1E, basically what you could do is you could take in a snap decision, you could choose to take half of the amount of the die that you would have to roll. So if I was rolling a d12 for like my grit check or something, and the DC for that roll was going to be a 6, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to take half of that and not even risk rolling in this snap decision. So I'm going to take that 6 and I'm just going to pass and I'm not going to risk rolling. They took that out and instead added a mechanic called knacks, which is essentially something that you are skilled at. And when you are skilled at something in this capacity with your knack, and it's usually something like, hey, I play soccer, so I'm really good at things that have to do with like soccer, so like kicking and like running and things like that. So if like you're chasing after something that is like you're chasing after like a spherical object that is rolling on the floor, you're going to use your knack with soccer to be able to succeed in that check. And they kind of took away the ability to use half of your roll and gave it to Nax instead for snap decisions, which I'm kind of about. But so you can have planned actions and snap decisions. Snap decisions kind of roll over into fears. So when you have your fears, I was saying before, during character creation, you establish your fear. And when you're facing one of your fears, all of the rolls that you are making are made with snap decisions. So everything's going to be a snap decision. You cannot use adversity tokens to help your friends. Even they can use them to help you. And then depending on the severity of your fear, you were going to have to make checks with up to a -3 penalty. And you also can't use your Nax when it comes to fears. And then they have a whole thing about doing harm. Because this is supposed to be like a... I don't want to say like a... Okay, girl, chill. I don't want to say it's not really supposed to be like a combat or violence heavy game. So doing harm has a lot of implications to it. You're not supposed to do harm to anything or anyone that is out of your age range. So an adult should not be doing harm to a teen. A teen should not be doing harm to a child, which is kind of a given, but I feel like some people do need to hear that. And so what will happen is the GM will ask, what are you willing to risk? What are you risking by doing this harm? And what are you hoping to gain from it, from the inciting player? And they're going to say, you know, what they're risking, what they're hoping to accomplish, and what skill they're going to be using. And then if they are doing character versus character, this will then have the other character, the one who is being acted upon. Same question. What are you risking? What are you hoping to gain? What check are you trying to make to either avoid harm or to combat this harm coming upon you? And then it's going to be basically character versus character. It's going to be whoever rolls highest. And then whoever rolls highest wins the narrative. And they are able to, with the GM, narrate what happens and how this conflict resolves. So there's not like attack rolls or anything like that really when it comes to this system. It's basically winning the right to narrate what happens. Nobody harms babies except Baby Royale coming in. First baby standing wins. And then we have spending money, which this doesn't really matter to me. Children cannot have jobs. Teens have limited access to money, and then adults have more access to money. So it's truly dependent upon your how you're playing, on whether or not you're going to. And I'm going to bend my book. I'm sorry if this offends anyone. So yeah, it depends on how you're playing, if you're going to allow your characters to go and buy shit. Because they're allowed to. But if they're a child, like, what money do they really have access to? It offends me. Just bend it even more. I like having the player... Yes. So this system very much heavily relies on improv and really the collaborative storytelling more than pretty much other games that I have played in the past, such as like VTM or D&D. It's got a very heavy hand with roleplay, and you know, you are very much building this story with each other, and that starts even with just character creation and town creation. I didn't show it before, but there are some tables where you roll up and you and your players are going to establish the town that you're in, if that's something that you would want to do with your players. But you're going to establish the town, you're going to establish rumors, and you're going to establish what buildings you have, what businesses, what the town looks like, kind of what the town is all about. And that's something that happens amongst the table and not is just solely on the GM to establish. I would buy TTRPG stuff as a teen in this game. So, chapter 5, this is the last chapter. It is powered characters. Players cannot create a character with powers to play throughout the campaign, but early in the first session, the GM will introduce a powered character that will then be co-controlled by all of you. And I think this is a optional thing. I'm not really going to be using this very much in my game. Hi, Chunky! When the powered character is first introduced, the GM gives each of you a few deliberately selected traits called aspects. The GM shares 2 aspects per player by placing them face up in the middle of the table. Each of you then selects 2 aspects to control for the powered character. Players should discuss and agree upon which aspects each of you wants, with the GM arbitrating any disputes. As you're discussing the aspects, if there are any that you think might make your experience in the game less enjoyable, talk it over with the table and have the GM replace it. Once everyone has selected their aspects, place the 2 you'll have in front of you, leaving them face up for everyone else to see. These aspects provide information that helps you play the powered characters, such as their personality traits, patterns in their behaviors, the relationships of the group, and of course, their powers. So I think this is very much 11 from Stranger Things. Like, you have like the core main group of kids, and then you have their superpowered friend. This isn't something that I'm going to be using in my particular game, but I get why this is included, especially if you have like if you're going like very supernatural or like aliens or big, like, you know, the kids are fighting against like a government entity. It kind of gives them that that power to back them up in those instances. Then the GM puts a pool of 7 power tokens within reach of all of you. You'll need these to activate the powered character's special abilities. In addition, the GM places a card near this pool that has powered character's 6 stats and their corresponding die. When situations come up that relate to the aspects in front of you, you'll be in charge of the narration. In all other situations, player will share control of that powered character. As with the rest of the game, you share control of this character's narrative. So that's nice. So depending on what aspects that you have chosen, you are the one in control of those. So 11 and Sloth have a baby. That child becomes a power. Super powered. Much power. While playing, you may flesh out the power character as you see fit, adding desires and motivations as they go. Once a player introduces a new aspect to the powered character, the rest should go along with it, unless there are issues with established behaviors or cards that players have, or unless anyone asks to hit the brakes on the aspect. Create a new note card for that aspect. Remember, though, you cannot, under any circumstances, give the powered character new powers. Only the GM can. For aspects that refer to another member of the party, the player who has that aspect shouldn't also be playing the character most impacted by the aspect. After all, if they did, it could lead to awkward moments at the table. So if you're doing something with the powered character that severely impacts another member of the party, don't. Or at least do so with permission. Also remember that you, the players, are controlling the powered character. The characters in the game are not. This isn't about the PCs manipulating the powered character. It's about the players telling a story together that includes this powered character. That does not mean that the powered character will always agree with all of the players. In fact, it'd be boring if they did, but generally... Hey, Vlad. Oh, I lost my place. Oh no. Oh no, where was I? Doesn't mean the power, but generally the relationship will not be an adversarial one. The GM's control over the powered character should drive the narrative towards exciting encounters and stressful situations. If players are unsure what to do or seem stuck, the GM could certainly have the powered character figure something out. This also seems very, this is something I don't really like, the DM PC. If you guys have ever come across that, it's the player character that the DM controls, or it's the NPC that the DM controls that is present for all of the adventure, and usually ends up being either overpowered or the story narrative focuses on this character far too much and not the actual player characters. So I don't know that I would use this, to be honest. Options for the powered character. Alternatively, for the element of surprise, the GM could wait to give you some aspects of the powered character, especially their powers, until they're relevant. That would be nice. So you have like a character who you don't know, like, what they actually can do. Let's see. The GM should also feel free to give out additional aspects as the game goes on. Perhaps it is, as above, that you discover a new aspect to add to the powered character's personality. But this could also be to get a player more involved with the control of that character. Finally, some players may not be comfortable having partial control over an NPC, especially if those players are new to role-playing. If you don't want to share control over the powered character, you can always opt out. And GMs, if you think that the players aren't ready for it and you want to keep big secrets from the players that the powered character knows, they don't have to have control over the character. As always, adapt to the rules and make sure you're enjoying yourselves as much as possible. So, yeah, I'm not. That's true. That is true, Dro. It's nice to have like a and as always, this is very lovely art. It is nice to have, and I'll introduce NPCs in order to help drive the narrative along, but they're never there for very long. Normally I'll be like, okay, like Grief in All We've Lost. I was like, okay, Grief needs to get them from point A to point B, and that is her function. Once she has done that, she's gonna be gone. Goodbye. That's kind of how I feel about like NPCs. NPCs should always drive the narrative, but they should never be the focus of the narrative. Thank you, Weasel. And then we have how to use the powered character's powers. This is interesting. You have degree of control, how precise the powered character is trying to be. So that will affect the. I have a lot of math going on here. So depending on how precise you want to be. So if you don't really care about precision when it comes to like the power, you're only going to add a +1 to that difficulty rating. Amount of experience. So if they are not very experienced, so if they have never done anything, if they've done things like this but never quite like this, untried, you'll add a +4. And then how much this breaks the rules of the universe. So if putting a small crack in a diamond, making a plant go from a seed to a flower in their palm, that's a +2. Scope. So if they're just trying to create a small fire in the palm of their hand, +2. So you're going to take all of these, you're going to take degree of control, amount of experience, deviation, and scope, and you're going to add these together, and that is going to be the DC for that roll. Once the GM has set the difficulty and shared it with you, you should decide as a group whether to attempt it. So that is another thing that is very prominent in this system. Decisions that are going to invariably affect the whole group, that is a decision that is made amongst the group. So if this powered character is going to make a check for something and one person in the group does not want it to happen, they will not make that check then, because it has to be like a unanimous decision that everyone agrees on that will forward the story. Which is really nice, because I've always, like, I feel like there's been moments in games I've been in where a character is doing something that I know is going to fuck the entire group. And I'm just like, don't do that. But you got to just let it happen, because that's what their character would do. The number of PT expended should factor into the narrative consequences of using the powered character's abilities. Because of the possibility of lucky breaks, you should spend PT one at a time. In addition to being the best choice for you mechanically, it also allows the GM to offer gradually worse choices for the consequences for the powered characters pushing themselves. Each time you spend PT, the GM will give you at least 2 choices of what could happen as a consequence. You'll decide as a group which consequence occurs. Just dissolve them into acid for it later. There are ways, yeah, kicking them out of the table. Unfortunately, in those situations, I was just a player, so. And I didn't really know how to advocate for myself because I was new to TTRPGs. Acid gives a nice little burn. Why are we kicking people? For doing selfish things in a collaborative storytelling game. So we have the little chart of PT spent. So this is basically power token, I believe. And this is only a powered character has this. So if 1 power token is spent, no effects or incredibly minor effects. 2, minor physical effects, such as a slight headache, minor tremors in the hands. 3, minor mental effects, momentary confusion, passing synesthesia, temporary loss of emotional control. 4, significant physical effects, such as stabbing pains, nausea. 5, significant mental effects, prolonged disorientation, inability to speak coherently. 6, profound physical effects, broken bones, blindness until they get a night's sleep, inability to stand. 7, profound mental effects such as memory loss, replacement of their personality with a new one until they get a night's sleep, erratic perception of reality. Oh, I have no problem killing other players that are screwing the party over. I feel like if I was in like a game where... If I was in a not streamed game and someone was doing something that was inadvertently adversely affecting the entire table, I think that I would do that as well. However, I've been in a lot of stream games, and you have to maintain at least a modicum of being a professional while you're in these games. So, and then this whole part is just a play-by-play of what would happen at a fictional table if this were to happen. A modicum, yeah, a modicum. Replenishing power tokens. In order to replenish their power tokens, the power character needs to rest, eat, or take another appropriate action. A full night's rest should fully restore the character unless they have exhausted all of their PT or dip below 0. In that case, recovery should take more time, though the exact duration is up to the GM. And we have some more. Oh, we actually have more chapters, but these are just very, very short. Yeah, stream games or FR, it's a little harder to deal with the problem because it can derail. Yeah. I think like a lot of people who are like trying to get into like doing actual plays or stream games, they don't really take that into effect. Like it's that a stream game is way different than just playing at home. Because in a stream game, you have an audience, and you have to, like, first and foremost, like, when you're doing a stream game, you're entertaining an audience. So when you have, like, these back and forths about, like, rules and stuff, like, that's not really entertaining. So if there's ever, like, and I've had this established with my players, if there is ever a argument about a ruling I make, I always say, you are going to take the ruling I give you, and then after game, we can argue about the ruling. When we're off stream, we can argue about the ruling. And then whatever we establish as the rule will then be the rule from then forward. But we're not arguing about ruling on stream. That drives me crazy because I have been a player in games where another player has argued with the GM on stream about a ruling, and it is mortifying to just be a part of that situation. So, isn't that just table? Yeah, you would think, Weasel. You would think. So, bike maintenance. This is another mechanic. You get a bike. And this is, I think this mostly applies to children and teens. I mean, unless like you're an adult riding a bike, there's nothing wrong with that either. But so bikes have an actual mechanic benefit depending on the color and upgrade that you want for your bike. So you will choose a color, and that color can give you anything from a +1 to a skill check, or it can give you some other benefits as well as upgrades that you can have for your bike, that all have mechanical benefits while you're riding the bike. So that's really nice because this game is supposed to be a game where you're a bunch of kids or teens or whatever moseying around a small town. How do you get around that small town? You're on your bike, duh. It's the best way. I hold that at my table now, and players can be salty, but the ultimate outcome is always positive. Yeah. Segways for adults or lime scooters. I know, you're a bike mechanic IRL. Big wheels, a trike, perhaps? But we have bike mechanics, bike maintenance, Just like riders should look over their bike after a ride, players and GMs should reflect over their game after each session. Bike maintenance is a key time to get feedback, integrate what you learned, and set up next time. So this is basically like listing your stars and wishes, having a little post-session chit-chat with your players about how they think the session went, anything that they want to, you know, bring to your attention, anything they want to commend you for or commend other players for. I'm working on stuff. Okay, Cookie. So free talk and decompression. After an intense bike ride, you need a moment to catch your breath. Before your bike maintenance discussion, make sure that everyone has the same opportunity. Stand up, get some water, use the bathroom, stretch your legs, just breathe, talk about something that just happened. Whatever you, the other players, and the GM need to do to step out of the game before reflecting over it. Make sure you give as much time as each person needs to be ready to reflect, even if it means coming back to the later parts of bike maintenance on another day. People process things at different speeds, and you can't rush someone's reflection. So this is stars and wishes is another thing that I've seen really emerge while being a part of actual plays. So we'll expand on these in the GM section, but in short, stars and wishes are a way to step out of character and plan for future sessions. Stars are things in the games you loved. You can list scenes, moments, mechanics, anything that helped make the game awesome for you. Wishes are things you want more of or want to see the game in for next time. These can be emotional beats, scenes, mechanics to use, moments for your character to experience, or themes you'd like to further explore. There are no wrong answers here. Share anything that you'd be excited to see in the upcoming session. So I think that's always nice. And I don't formally call it stars and wishes with my players, but I usually do message the group and I message people individually. Hey, what do you want to see? Where do you want your character to go? What do you think that your character would do next session? What do you want your character to do next session? Are there any interactions that you want to have for your character? Are there any storylines that you want to follow up with? And I think that's important because I can plan things as much as I want, but if it's not what my players actually want, I'm doing all of that planning for nothing because it's not a storyline or a story that they want to actually delve into. I like that they're including things like this. They're tools that people who have been playing TTRPGs have known and for the most part just take for granted as the thing to do, but new folks may. Yes, it's really nice that it's like included in the rule set. And, you know, like you said, people who have been playing TTRPGs likely do this stuff and they don't realize how important it is. But when you're stepping into a new hobby, you might not know, you might not know that this is sort of the norm. And it also, it gives a good baseline of what to expect in any TTRPG, not just in Kids on Bikes. Like, this should be something that is kind of across the board, what you're seeing at any table you play at, even a non-stream table, even at your home games. Like, this should be something that isn't taken into consideration. Chapter 7, information for the GM. I do need to, I think I'm gonna, if I continue to do these, I'm gonna buy a better camera so you guys can actually like read what the actual book says. So if you agreed to run the game for your friends, thank you for facilitating their experience with the game. GMing can be intimidating, so the purpose of this section is to offer some advice and some tools to help you run a great game for your friends. In the end, that's what GMing is all about, telling a great story with some friends. I can read. I can't. This is all I'm getting the words fed to me in an earpiece. When things go wrong. Before we get to the fun parts of GMing later in this section, let's talk about when things go wrong. So much of your job as a GM is making sure that things go well, that the story progresses, and that everyone has a good time, participates, and has time to shine. An even bigger part of the social responsibility of being a GM is ensuring everyone feels okay during the game, especially in a horror game. This responsibility means you need to know the difference between fun and trouble, what it looks like, and what to do when things spiral out of control. Many people will game together and never run into an issue, but because horror can touch on personal fears and sore spots, sometimes games can unintentionally spiral out of control. When that happens, use this section to know what to do. See what I did there? Just have us buy our own copies of the book. Listen, you didn't need to buy your own copy of the book. I would have given you all the information you needed. So I think this is a very important section as we're going to go in a little bit more detail. As someone who is neurodivergent and who sometimes has a hard time picking up social cues and like reading social cues. And as someone who does run a lot of games and who is in the GM seat quite often, it is good to have advice on how to recognize when something is wrong and what do you do in those situations. Because that's not really something that a lot of books and TTRPG books cover. So I like that they're including this because it can be very difficult to navigate these situations when you have so many different personalities at a table, when you have so many different people. It can just be really difficult to know what is the right thing to do and what is the right thing to say in these situations. So let's go. Visual cues are for fun and for discomfort and checking pressure. When people are engaged in the game and having a good time, they are often animated, leaning forward, eyes open, and are talking, being expressive, and having their character do things in the fiction. They may make jokes, exchange thoughts with you or other players, and offer ideas for the fiction. People having fun often look like they're watching a great TV show or hearing a great story from a friend. Of course, this can vary from person to person. For some people, being completely silent may be an indication that they're caught up in the events of the story. Talk to your players about what engagement looks like for them, perhaps at the start of your session 0. When someone is having a bad time, they are often withdrawn, distracted, or irritable. They may lash out, say snarky things, or take jabs at other players. They may make disparaging jokes about themselves or others. Sometimes, though, when someone is hurt or upset, they can become quiet, seem to try to make themselves smaller, and respond quietly, if at all. They may sit and stare in their lap rather than engage. There's it. Most will answer, I don't know, if asked to make a decision. They may also leave the table, go to the bathroom a lot, or stay in another room rather than return to the game. As with what fun looks like, discomfort can vary too. While cracking jokes might be a sign that they're engaged, humor can be a coping mechanism when people become uncomfortable. Or a person becoming more engaged in the story could be an attempt to shift the narrative into a direction they're more comfortable with. For some people, doodling, crafting, or playing on their phone may be a way to address overstimulation or discomfort. For others, allowing themselves something to focus on lets them actually listen and play better. Make sure everyone at the table knows what each other... So this is actually something that I part agree with. I have seen so many posts about when people's players are on their phones. Hey Justice, welcome on in. I have seen so many posts about people getting pissed when they see their players on their phones. And I think that they would if they ever saw a player on their phone, they would eject them right away. They would yell at them. They would, they don't tolerate, this is a no phone policy. And I think that is a very narrow-minded way to view things, because I like just fiddling with my phone. I'll just be scrolling through my phone absentmindedly, not even paying attention to my phone. It's just like a fidget toy essentially for me sometimes. So I think obviously if they're actively being distracted by their phone, that is something. But if they know what's going on, if they're still engaging at the table, but they're just, absentmindedly scrolling through a phone, I don't see why that should have any effect on you. Yeah, I mean, if you focus on the game at the same time, I don't see it. Yeah, exactly. I've seen so many posts, like, people getting, like, irate about it. And I can understand, I think, like, there is this maybe outdated view about cell phones where it's like, oh, you youngins and your phone, you're all distracted, blah, 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 blah. But I think a lot of the times my phone is like my my comfort. If I can't have my phone, I feel very uncomfortable. I feel very, it's my safety. It's my safety blanket. I have a local friend who legit says her clothes hurt when there's too much sound around her. Overstimulation without access to coping mechanisms can be yes. I have a player IRL that can't stop playing with things in his surroundings. When he starts getting up and grabbing a ball to bounce and then it rolls out of his grasp over the metal map, I draw the line, but otherwise, whatever helps him listen. We have a no phones rule for our games, but that's because of the noise and some of the players know that they will be distracted by their phone. But we also have a bunch of fidget toys. See, that's like, you know, that's, hey, phones can be distracting. Therefore, we're going to offer you, like, there's this, here are fidget toys to help, you know, to help you keep you guys focused. But yeah, those are my thoughts on that. I think, obviously, Dro, like, you guys have had that discussion, and it's not like if you're on your phone, you're getting thrown out. And it's a unanimous, like, yes, we agree. You know, phones can be distracting. They can be loud, so we're going to just have a rule for no phones at the table that everyone agrees on. Versus targeting someone who is scrolling on their phone but still actively engaging and then getting mad because your perception of what engagement looks like is different. Yeah, it was a group compromise. I didn't get all imperious with the players. Okay. Moving on to wrong turns. Sometimes things go too far. Someone forgot to use the road signals, wasn't able to, or didn't notice people were uncomfortable. And this was something that we went over at the beginning of the book. The road signals, basically, the stoplight system. Red is, hey, we need to stop immediately. Yellow is proceed with caution. Green is, hey, we're good to go. They just call it something else in this book. Triggers are by their nature unknowable and unpredictable. There are some signs your game is going wrong, such as a lot of uncomfortable silences with people glancing at each other but not saying anything, performing the discomfort action discussed earlier, or just not looking with excitement to you for what happens next. When someone is uncomfortable or when things have taken a wrong turn, it's time to take a rest stop. Everyone should leave the table and then come back after a breather. Check in with anyone who looks uncomfortable. The entire game was getting away from you. It's time to stop and do a whole table check-in. If things have escalated this far, follow these steps. Ask how each player is feeling. Ask them to talk about their negative emotions they're experiencing. Ask how you can coast, backpedal, or brake. Do what you just laid out. Take another rest stop after that scene. Check in again. For step 3, remember to offer alternatives to what happened in the fiction that is upsetting people. Have everyone offer ideas or thoughts on where it can go that can get people will feel better about. If they say nothing needs to change, then they may have just needed to vent. If any new unplayable content comes up, add it to the detour list. If on step 3, someone says that there's nothing to be done or can't communicate how to make it better for them, it's time to end the game for now. Remember, no one gets left behind. This is one of those times where the person most upset should take an active role in setting the tone and pace for the next session. I watched a playback of a stream game that I'm in. I fidget enough for the whole tape. That's how, so I'm like constantly like, and I become very aware of it when I'm in a game where I'm just like, I'm like constantly looking, because I'm like looking at my different monitors. Like I'll usually have like Twitter up and I'll just be like absentmindedly scrolling through Twitter. Or like I'll be like looking around because like one of the animals will be up to some fuck shit. So I'm like looking at them, seeing what they're doing. And I'm like, wow, I'm just constantly moving. But this brings up a good thing that I think most people don't know is an option. When something happens in a game that no one is satisfied with, you can retcon that. You can go back and you can redo a scene. And it doesn't matter if the game is streamed. I've retconned stuff in All We've Lost. Me and Bones decided that something for like that Olenya did wasn't working for how she envisioned Olenya to be as a character. And I was like, all right, we'll go back and we'll retcon that because this is your character. And you want to tell a story, their story in a particular way. And I'm going to help you facilitate that. So I think that's really important to note that if a scene or if you say something and you're like, wait, that's not, my character wouldn't say that. You can just say, hey, can I retcon that? I don't think my character would say that. Instead, they would say this, or they would not say anything at all. And I think it is completely okay to go about it that way. Rather than leaving the table feeling upset that something happened that you felt wasn't true to your character or to the story that you guys are trying to tell. Ending games permanently. Yeah, one of the keys is that players enjoy their character and their... Yes. Yeah, and if at any point a player feels that their character is just like, it's getting away from them, it's like, hey, we can just take a step back, we can think about it, we can determine what direction you actually want your character to go in. And that's also why doing the little check-ins and the little stars and wishes is very important to make sure that everyone is on the same page for the direction they want the story to go in, as well as that you, the GM, and you, the player, depending on what your position is at the table, are on the same page for where you want the characters to go. Because I can have a story in my head for what I think Aleph, where I want Aleph to end up. But if that's not where Jay wants her to end up, then what am I writing? What am I doing that for? Because the player is the one that's most important to be satisfied with where their character's story arc is going. So it's important that you're on the same page when it comes to that stuff. Ending games permanently. Sometimes something has happened in or outside of the game that leave players unable to see a way forward. When that happens, take a rest stop and do the steps in the wrong term section. And starting on page 76, people seem angry or frustrated and don't see a way forward. Don't force it. Thank them for being honest and stop playing for now. Do your debriefing and then let everyone go home. You may want to take a longer time with debrief questions than usual. Check in with your players between sessions to confirm that they want to continue playing the game and give them the chance to share anything with you privately that they need to express. You can report those things back to the group confidentially. That's very important. Don't put your players like on the spot. Sometimes, and for the most part, at a table, you should all feel comfortable voicing your opinions to each other. And that's very important to have that. However, sometimes it's uncomfortable. And it's okay to be uncomfortable voicing an opinion to multiple people. Sometimes it's okay that you just want to speak to the GM, or even if you want to speak to another player or someone outside of the table and have that sort of go-between because you don't quite know how to navigate or you don't know how to feel about it, or maybe you just need an outsider's perspective because sometimes you're just too ingrained in the story or too ingrained in your own feelings in that moment. So I think it's okay to get like an outsider's perspective of, hey, what do you think about this situation? How would you feel about this situation? What do you think I should do in this situation? I think having that sort of outside perspective is important because sometimes you can go to another player or you can go to the GM, but they're too much in it already. They've got too many already preconceived notions of what's going on to give you an honest, unbiased opinion if you're having issues with the story or with another player or with another player's character. Yes, sometimes you need to step away from a mountain to see the whole of it. If all players wish to continue at the beginning of the next session, ask if there's anything from the last game you want to address before you jump into the session. If they do, use the steps from the wrong turn section. If they still don't know how to proceed, it's best to remove the content and start this session from where that leaves you. Never keep content that upset or hurt people in the game if they are struggling with it. If any players wish to leave the game, let them. Their safety and happiness is more important than that game. Once you know which player or players want to leave the game, let the other players know. They may change their opinion on continuing the game. Be sure to include yourself in these discussions and to deliberately make the decision about whether you want to continue or to play or not. As the GM, your safety and comfort matters just as much as one of your players. That's another important thing. A GM is still a player. A GM is still a player in the game, and it is important to consider their feelings in situations as well. When we went to PAX, we went to a panel about romance in TTRPG, and at the end of the panel, they were doing questions, and one guy stood up and he was like, all of my players are really they really want to do romance, and make romance a pretty important focal point to the campaign that I'm about to start, but I don't know that I'm comfortable with it. He's like, is that something that I should work on, or that, I should tell my players I'm not comfortable with? And for the most part, all of the panelists were like, you already answered your own question. You're not comfortable with it, so you don't have to include it if you're not comfortable with it. So I think that's really important to note, that as a GM, you don't have to push through your own discomfort in order to accommodate the player's wants and needs if it means making yourself feel a certain type of way about it. Okay. Starting to craft the story. In Kids on Bikes, the setup at the start of the game is vital to helping them craft a good story later, as it lets players create the town and establish the connections between each character. Let's talk about the elements to pay attention to during the setup in order to have more hooks for the adventure and to get inspiration you need for the upcoming game. So, notable organizations. What are these organizations hiding? Is there something sinister about one of these organizations, or is one of them holding back a great evil? Notable landmarks. Is there more than meets the eye to one of these landmarks? What happened in the past that made this place such a nexus of attention? And could it factor into the powered character's backstory? Rumors about the town. Which rumor is true? Which rumor is completely false? Which rumor is only part of a much more complex story? More importantly, which rumor gets all of the players excited? Strengths and tropes. What are the characters going to generally be good at based on their strengths and tropes, either as a group or individually? Based on their strengths, what are some things that the players have decided would be exciting for them to do with their character? How can you give them opportunities to do those things? For the things that multiple members of the group will be good at, those are a good way for the group to form at the start of the game, giving them all something that they could be successful at together. Once the characters have learned to rely on one another, this can be a good opportunity to specific characters to shine, especially if they haven't had a chance yet, or if their player has been taking more of a passive role in the game. So that's another thing. Like, if you're making, so like, we're just gonna go, because my mind immediately jumps to D&D. So if you're doing like an all bard party, why would you put your players in like a dungeon diving campaign? You know? If you have a bunch of bards who are really high charisma, really high persuasion, they just wanna schmooze and talk their way out of situations and learn rumors and secrets and do that kind of thing. Do very like political intrigue. Don't put them into a dungeon where they have to hack and slash their way out of it, because that's just setting them up for failure or setting them up for frustration. Festival campaign. Oh yeah. Fears and flaws. The things that their characters don't want to encounter are things that the players are telling you they want to see. What are some good ways to have characters confront their fears? What are some situations where their fears or flaws might make things awkward for characters but fun for the players? Where are some tense moments where you can give players the chance to roleplay their characters rising above their fear and even possibly overcoming their fear? Put all the bards in a noir mist. I think that would be fun. So again, you want... Sometimes you think about like things like your character's fear, and you want to make sure that when you're creating a character, it lends something to the story. And you want to think, what is something that my character would fear that would be very satisfying in them overcoming, or what do I envision the scene where they overcome that fear looking like? And that's something that you communicate with the GM. That is something that you can set up to happen. I know a lot of the times people think that like with games that everything has to be improv, everything has to be spontaneous and out of the blue. And, you know, you're getting your first reaction to a situation happening, but that's not true. You can discuss scenes that you want to happen, whether with the GM or with another player. You can set these all up prior to the game starting, prior to the session. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think some people are like, no, it's got to be improv. It's got to be all, you know, real. And, you know, we can't just like script it. And it's like, no, you can. You literally can if you want. There's nothing wrong with that. Relationship questions, especially when the negative questions about how characters are connected. What are some pressure points that could press for the group to create tension? For questions about characters who don't know each other, what truth is there to what they've heard and what isn't true at all? So I think this is also, and this is very much a table by table basis. It is okay to have conflict at the table in character. Once it gets out of character, that's when there's the issue. But it's okay to have party conflict, inter-party conflict. That's completely fine, and that actually can make things really, really juicy for the drama. Again, though, that is something that you have to make sure everyone is okay with at the table, because some people don't want to see that conflict. Some people do want the rainbows and butterflies and lollipops and all of that when it comes to their party dynamics, and they don't want to see the conflict. But I think that for those who are open to it, I think it brings a lot of story possibility, and really good, juicy story possibility. It's got to be real. It's got to be all real in our fantasy game. And those plans for the character yes, exactly. Makes it more spicy. Because, you know, when you're like, in this table, I'm here for the drama. Just give me the juice. I want it. I love character drama. But, you know, there are moments of, hey, like, I think some of the best moments in any of the games I've been in have been the setup, where I've either spoken to another player, or I've spoken to the GM, and I'm like, hey, I want this to happen. I don't want it to happen now, though. I want it to happen 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 sessions down the road. But I want there to be hints of it, and I want there to be build up, and I want this to happen. Because that's how you set up for a great story, is planting those little seeds as you go. And in order to plant those seeds, there needs to be the discussion. You actually have to plan for those seeds to be planted. I have one character in my campaign, and one of the key aspects of his character is the family he developed. I was looking for a position to put the characters in where they could experience loss, but so much of his character is based around that family unit that I had to make sure he would be okay with losing a family member. He really wasn't, and we worked out a solid hook to jumpstart the next arc instead. So I feel planned events can absolutely enrich the game. Yes. Yeah, and that's important too, because like sometimes as a GM, I know you get this, Joe. As a GM, I'm like, I have these plans for like my players' characters, but sometimes they might not be okay with those plans. And you have to do that check-in to be like, hey, I want to go in this direction with your character. There's something in their backstory. I really want to follow it. I want to kind of get to the root of it. But in order for that to happen, we have to kind of touch on this subject. And they might not be okay with that. And that's okay. You just reroute, because you know what? That's what you do. You just reroute. There's nothing wrong with just being like, oh, okay, we're gonna U-turn and we're gonna go with something else, then I can work something out. And that's what a good GM does. A good GM can at any moment flip and completely go in a separate direction from what they were originally planning, if it means that their players are more comfortable. Okay. Let's see. So this talks about, this is some more in-game stuff that they had established at the beginning about the various businesses and things that this party had established in their town, and talking about how to incorporate that all and make it all work for an overarching campaign. Tone and pace. One of the most difficult elements of GMing is maintaining a coherent game without it getting boring. There are two key elements that can be particularly difficult: tone and pace. With respect to tone, players will discuss at the beginning of the game whether they want a serious game, a silly one, or something in the middle. However, especially in campaign-style games, having only serious, morose characters glumly struggling against the forces of evil can get old. So, too can a cartoonish hodgepodge of characters absurdly gallivanting through unrealistic scenarios after unrealistic scenario. Figuring out what the right balance is part of the art of GMing. The same is true of the pace of the game. The world you're helping to create will feel disjointed if it throws the players right into direct conflict with a powered monster without any preamble every time they play. Spending 7 hours establishing character and their relationships before they get even a hint as to central conflict too can get boring. Again, variety is vital. In my opinion, I love to scheme with my players to add secret. Yes, I love scheming. Love that. So much of like me and Bones are constantly talking about like Olenya and like what we want for Olenya and like trying to figure out like her angle and like literally like probably novels we have written together, just scheming, plotting, being nefarious little guys. But I think this section is really important as a GM because I know that me, myself, and I, as a GM, especially as a baby GM, I only started GMing last year. I feel like sometimes my sessions are boring, or not paced well, or I feel like I'm rushing, or if I'm going too slow. And I think the best indicator is just asking your players, because I have felt that I've either rushed or nothing really happened, or I felt like maybe the session was a little boring, but then my players will be like, no, I loved it. This was a really good session. I had so much fun. So I think it is important to check in with your players about that as well, because you yourself are not going to have the best indicator of how you are doing. It's a little hard to look at yourself like objectively. Last year, oh, thank you. No, I have a lot to learn, but I'm glad that you think so. Yeah, that feeling never goes away. You can just make it feel better by checking in. The response is always surprising me. Yeah, it's always like really nice, because sometimes I'll feel like really bad about a session. I'm like, man, I don't think that I hit the right marks when it, like with the NPCs or with like the storytelling. But then my players are like, well, that was really good. I can't wait for the next session. So that feels really nice sometimes. Or sometimes they're like, hey, I wanted to see this kind of thing instead. And then you just mark that down as, okay, this is something I need to add, or this is something I need to work on for the next session. As a result, GMing often relies heavily on your ability to read the group and adjust to the tone of the game. There are, however, a few suggestions that have generally worked for us in the past. Don't feel like you have to roleplay everything that happens in the world of the game. The characters are driving for 2 hours to a neighboring town. You don't need to have the characters narrate their conversation for those 2 hours. So that's something, because a lot of travel happens in All We've Lost. I will usually ask my players, hey, is there anything you wish to discuss while you're traveling, or can we move along? And if they have something to discuss with each other, they will. And if they don't, we just skip it, because there's nothing worse than trying to RP through travel. Encourage players to tell you whether they want more or less of something, both before game and even during sessions. If the group is getting bored with the way the current game is going, work to give them more of what they want. Again, communication is key. Ask your players what they want. When you have nailed everything right while running the session, it feels great. My character sings 99 bottles. Rocks fall, Vlad's character dies. Encourage players to actively push the narrative toward what they want. In Kids on Bikes, players have control over more than just their characters' reactions. So if they want some action to happen, let them make that action happen. Again, that's important. Sometimes, and this is something I'm also guilty of as a player, sometimes I wait. I like wait for things to happen, and try to be reactive instead of proactive in games, when I very much can just say, hey, this is what my character's going to do, and then it's up to the GM to react to what I'm doing. And I think that's okay to do. It's okay to put your foot forward and drive the narrative in a direction that you want it to go in, so long as, you know, it's reasonable. Because it is a little hard to just put that all on the GM to do. It's a little hard to just be like, hey, yeah, you know, is there anything that happens that I should, you know, be aware of? And then it's like, well, and the GM's like, yeah, this thing happens. So yeah, be proactive in your gaming, even as a player. Anyone seeing a bottle of beer gets rocks and swarms of insects. You're a really solid GM. We are always learning. I mean, I've been DMing through systems since the early 90s, and I still learn all the time. Even Bones have shown me something I've never thought of doing. Oh, thank you. I think, but like, so I think the mark of a good GM is knowing that they still have a lot to learn. That you're learning constantly in every game, every session that you do, you're going to be learning something. And if you think at any moment that you're not, that you don't have anything, that you've learned all there is to learn, and that you are the best GM, and that your players think you're the best GM, and that you can do nothing wrong, and all of your stories are really good and really enthralling, you're probably a bad GM. This is the bar. They get a performance check to save themselves by doing it uncommonly well. There's so many DMs and so many different ways to run a game, and so many different stories that you're always... Yes. If players seem to want different things, feel free to pause the game, discuss what's happening on a meta level, and then step back into the game. For example, if Carlos is really enjoying the slower paced role-playing, but Yasmin wants some action, discuss how to find a middle ground. Is there a way for both of them to get what they want, or can one of them agree to hold off on what they want in exchange for more later on? So that's something that I've had to balance in All We've Lost, because Joel is very much a little combat goblin. And then Jay and Bones really like the RP. So I try to give them a little bit of combat. You get a little bit of combat as a treat every couple of sessions. I'm talking about you.
Did you say combat?
Yeah, I did say combat. Get out of my... Go away.
Real quick.
No. So yeah, I think it's important to establish what your characters want, what the players want, and just give them a little something. Like, Bones wanted a heist, so I set up a heist for everyone. But we also did a lot of RP. We do a lot of RP all the time. And then I'm like, okay, here is this deadly encounter. Have fun. And then I let them go fight in the combat. Let's see. Wait, where are we? After particularly intense sessions or more parts of sessions, try to give the players a bit of a break. You probably noticed in film that after big action scenes, there's usually a bit of a lull, especially if a character has suffered a big loss. That's important. You don't need to constantly be barraging your players with things. I think when that happens, you don't have enough time to breathe. And like, although it is fictional and everything, when you're getting a constant onslaught of things happening to your character one after another, it's hard to manage. And you don't have that chance to kind of step back and analyze and kind of think, okay, what, now that this has happened, how does this change my character? How does this change my character's thoughts? And what would my character do in reaction to those? Well, if you don't have the time to think about that, it takes away a lot of narrative possibilities. You're a player in the game too. If you're enjoying the pace and the tone, chances are the group is too. When in doubt, just ask the other players if they're enjoying themselves as much as you are. Again, just ask your players. And if you're a player, tell your GM if they're doing a good job. Little combat nougat. How to share narrative control with your players. Depending on how many role-playing games you've enjoyed over the years, you might be used to different approaches for the GM. In traditional role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, the GM directs a lot of the action and is almost always responsible for telling players what happens in response to actions. As a result, with these approaches, each player is only responsible for their own character's actions, not for the world around them. As you've seen in the rules, Kids on Bikes takes a very different approach, and for GMs used to the other styles, the shift can be disorienting. In this section, we'll talk a bit about how to best make the shift that Kids on Bikes ask you to make. Lean on the rules. Many of the rules in Kids on Bikes mechanize this by giving control to the players. In creating the game, and especially in our revisions for the second edition, we did our best to make it easy for you to share the story with everyone at the table, so embrace the rules. For examples, when injuries could occur, players get to set the limits for their characters, which in many games isn't the case. Let players tell you what could happen to their characters instead of dictating it. By having them set the stakes, you're giving them good, meaningful control over the narration and making sure that they'll have fun in the game no matter what. So this is especially... This kind of refers to the doing harm section, where you are saying, the inciting player is saying what they are risking and what they are hoping to gain. So if you are if you're fighting someone with a knife, you can say, I'm really worried about them stabbing me. And if they win that narration, they can still say that they get nicked or something, or they can even say that they get stabbed. But you're giving that to the player to narrate. You're giving that option to the player to narrate what happens to them. I'm about to run a game without any role-playing, but my players are excited about the story. Any tips how you would run a game like that? About 12 sessions long. Without any role-playing? What kind of game is it? Like, what system? I've never... Without role-playing. D&D 5e? Oh, are they like... Do they, like, not want to role-play? Is that the thing? But my players are excited about the story. Any tips how you would run a game like that? Okay. I think if they're excited about the story, like pizza without the sauce. Where's the sauce? It's under the cheese. I think if they're excited about the story, so I think that there is this notion that role-playing means you're in character, talking as your character throughout. However, it is perfectly okay to narrate what your character is doing as though you are an omniscient god that's just puppeteering them. And I think that that is probably something that more people are going to be comfortable with, is saying, oh, so so-and-so is actually going to go do this, and they actually want to talk to this person and ask them about this particular thing to see if that they can figure out what the secret is for this object. And that's not quite role-playing in the sense that a lot of us think of, but it is still role-playing. You're still playing a role in the story. But I think that that's kind of more, you're not doing dialogue and all of that. You're not doing a silly little voice, but you're still role-playing. You're still playing the role of your character. It's just in a little more bit of a passive way. Can't just put them in combat for 12 sessions. I think that caused my brain to fold up. Gotcha. Yeah, I think like you don't have to force them to kind of interact with NPCs. They could just say, hey, I'm looking for this, and you can still make them roll. Hey, I'm looking, can I persuade this character to do this for me? And you can still make them roll, and they don't have to, you know, say how they persuade them or, you know, say like line by line. I think kind of meeting them at their comfort level is important. I know that Joel is not as comfortable RPing as like Jay and Bones are, like RPing in character. So I try to meet him at his level when in All We've Lost, because I know that that's not something he's super comfortable with yet. So yeah, I think it's really just about meeting their comfort level, because I think for the most part, most people, if they're interested in the story, they are going to be interested in role playing, but just not at the capacity that I think most of us think of role playing. But yeah, 12 sessions of combat does seem a little awful. You can have a mix of both first-person dialogue and third-person omniscient narrator. Yeah. I mean, also some people, like, so when I first started playing D&D, I wasn't sure that I was going to be really good at RPing, and I was really nervous. This was like 4 years ago now. I was really nervous. I was thinking that I wasn't going to be good at RP, and being around, and I think being around other people who were role playing at the table kind of instilled me with confidence to at least give it a shot. And then I was like, oh wait, I really like doing this. I enjoy doing this. This is really fun. So maybe it's just a matter of them like not really having that quote unquote safe space to explore that. Yeah, man, of course. Same is true with asking players. Okay, that's talking about the powered character. Ask interesting questions. In many role-playing games, players really only answer one question over and over again. What do you do in response to what I've just narrated? It's not a bad question at all, but it limits players to controlling only their character and forces the GM to be the only person to have all of the answers. Kids on Bikes ask you to shift away from that and ask interesting questions of your players about the world around them. To help you do that, here are some other kind of questions you'll ask your players during the game. Most of these categories are not mutually exclusive, so mix and match to suit your needs. Hey, Bashman! Especially if you feed the lore along with the story, players aren't keen on doing lots of character development. Roguelike D&D. Close questions. Though these kinds of questions sometimes get bad reputation, they can be very powerful in the game. Sometimes they're as simple as a yes or no question, and sometimes they're short answers that establish a fact. So, does the teacher still have the apple you gave them on their desk? No, he doesn't. Sigh. I thought maybe he'd accepted my peace offering. What's the name of the town's bike shop? Mike's Bikes. What did your dad make for dinner? Meatloaf. Again. Open questions. At the other end of the spectrum, open questions require some elaboration, not a short, simple answer. Consequently, these push your players to establish relationships, explain parts of the world of the game, or give a rationale. Often they start with how it or why. It's fine for players to answer these questions about NPCs in the game, especially if their characters interacting with them. Well, that role didn't work out for you. Why isn't your boss convinced about where you were? Crap, he sees the dirt on my shoes. No, so he knows I haven't been in the warehouse all day. You got a lucky break. How does luck help you elude the snallygaster? Ah, the meatloaf. Ah. Why'd you put ketchup on the meatloaf? You know I like barbecue sauce. Why are you interested in the work with your aunt does at her job? Ever since she explained virology to me. So this is very much instead of you, the GM, having control over all of the narrative, it's letting the players make up things that are then considered canon for the world. So if I ask my player, hey, you see your dad came home from a long day of work. How do you think he's feeling? And then they go on about how their dad's a construction worker and how, you know, they've been having issues with their boss and blah, 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 blah. Then you're letting the player make those decisions for this character, for this NPC. Follow-up questions. These are questions to pose when you want your players to elaborate more. Often, these are the clearest ways to tell your player that they have control over what happens in the world of the game, especially if they're used to the GM telling them what happens and thus only give short answers. So just further letting your players know, because sometimes, you know, you'll as a GM, you'll ask your players a question and they'll give an answer. But you're like, you know what, let me let them dictate more of what's going on. And then you ask the follow-up. That's such a good feeling when you have PCs willing to do that. It takes so much pressure off and the players. Yes. And that's why I'm really enjoying what I am seeing so far from Kids on Bikes is, as the GM, you already have a lot of pressure with like the story and everything, and basically herding cats. So to kind of take that pressure off and to really make it feel like a collaborative experience is very nice. It's a very satisfying feeling. Respond with flexibility. Having a rough idea of where the story is headed is good. It will help you tease details or drop in clues, but only if you won't feel locked into that. This is especially true for the early sessions, where you and the players are just settling into your small town. You have it in your head that all of the actions are going to take place at the mines, but the characters don't leave the school. Adjust. Even if that means the monster this week isn't a coal golem. You might think of the roller rink as going to be a big draw, but the characters might never visit it or find the secret passage to the underground supercomputer. There's no reason that the computer can't be under the ice cream store they always find their way back to, is there? Flexibility is important in the game. This is the whole thing why I was saying you adjust. If you want your players to end, if you desperately want your players to end up at a certain spot, adjust. Make it so that spot is hard for them to avoid. That or completely rewrite. Go a different direction. Take feedback. One of the scariest things to do when GMing can be asking players what could help them enjoy the game more, but it's also one of the most powerful ways to make sure that everyone's having fun. Using stars and wishes discussed on page 102 is a great way to make sure that you know what the players like best and what they'd like to see more of in the future. But it's not necessarily the only time to seek feedback. After a part of the session that you enjoyed, you can do a quick check-in with your players by asking, did you like that part? Especially if you aren't sure if the players did. That's me. I'm like, me on break. Hey, did you guys like that? Is everyone having fun? Is everyone having fun? You guys good? Was that fun for you? Along those lines, sometimes if the characters are taking a long car ride, players might want to roleplay the conversations they have in the car. Other times, they may want to just cut to arriving at their destination. A great question to ask before something like this: do you want to jump ahead? Literally what I said. Do you want to jump ahead, or do you have anything you want to discuss? That's why we have the screen. But seriously, it's just adaptable. Yeah. Joe gets it. Players don't need to know what I have prepared, okay? Joel will come over when I'm like prepping for a session. I'm like, go away. Get out of here. You can't know. You can't know this is all bullshit. Focus on fun. Ultimately, this is what sharing narrative control is all about. A key part of your job is make sure everyone at the table has fun, including you. If you make your decisions with this in... Yeah. Thanks. With this in mind, everyone's going to have a blast. And when players get to have control over what happens in the world around their characters, they're able to put things that they would want, that they would find fun in the game. Yeah, I like giving them the option to do things while traveling, and after 1 or 2 times with no action, I'll just... Yeah. Well, that's why I literally am like, hey, is there anything you guys want to discuss? You have however many days that this travel is going to take place. Do you have anything you want to do? Is there anything you want to discuss during this time? And if they're like, no, not really, I'm like, perfect. Let's fucking fast forward here. I don't want to role play travel. That's a nightmare for me. Make failing a stat check fun. One of the key differences between Kids on Bikes and role-playing games that focus on combat is that, as in life or in the stories we've enjoyed reading and watching, failure isn't necessarily all bad. While it certainly means that the thing the character was trying to do doesn't happen, it doesn't mean the players have failed. Think back to the source material that you've enjoyed and that you've probably drawing inspiration from to run the game. In those stories, the characters don't always succeed at what they're trying to do right off the bat. If they did, it wouldn't be a very interesting story. So when players aren't successful, remember that this is an opportunity for creativity on their part, and if necessary on your part, to approach the problem from another angle. It's also the chance for the story to take an unexpected twist. This goes into creating aspects for powered characters. So it says, though players will share narrative control when it comes to powered characters, initially creating aspects falls on you. When creating those aspects, you're free to give players anything that you might think will be fun. However, that much freedom can be daunting to the GM, so Appendix K features both sentence starters to create those aspects and rollable examples. So let's just flip to Appendix K. Appendices. Okay, so we see here aspects for powered characters. So this is nice. So it gives you can basically randomize if you want. A physical skill they have is lockpicking, juggling, card shuffling. They're incredibly good with technology, animals, puzzles. The elderly and intellectual skill they have is an eidetic memory, the ability to do complex calculations, calming down people who are upset. A virtue they seem to have is compassion, honesty, blah, blah, blah. And there's a bunch of other sentences to fill in, which will help you develop this character. Because, you know, you don't want them to just be like the rando superpowered kid in the group that has no personality or anything discerning about them besides their power. You want them to feel like a real actual person. When creating aspects, try to give players ones that can have fun with role-playing, but also ones that connect with how you initially imagine the powered character to be. The way that players craft the narrative around them might change the meaning of these aspects, but the powered character's fears and motivations will feel more coherent if you have a possible backstory in mind when you craft them. So if they're unwilling to touch water, make sure that you have a reason with that in mind, but leave room in the narration for players to shift that depending on their contributions. Also, don't be afraid to have aspects in tension with each other. Having a powered character who seems to know nothing about their past but desperately wants to find their family could create some interesting moments, and it certainly makes their goal more complicated. On the other hand, avoid direct contradictions like having them have the virtue of patience and the vice of impatience. If you're rolling and get something you think is contradictory or too hard to play with another aspect, just re-roll. Consequences for using the powered character's powers. So this is just two little charts for mental effects and physical effects that you can just roll on instead of having it like pre-established. And then this talks about consequences, having the players choose the consequences from the choices that you give them. You can give them a real moment of surprise by giving them two options that they haven't encountered before. If the powered character has always gotten a headache, suddenly switching that to a muscle weakness would be a good way to make them wonder what's different this time, as long as there is something different this time. Exertion past bounds. Exertion past bounds of power tokens. So this is if your character basically uses all of their power tokens. When someone suggests going beyond the powered character's PT limit, the GM must first consider whether the powered character is willing to overexert and risk harm for their friends. If it's a true crisis and the character has been kind to them, they're more likely to risk it, but if the powered character has been used as a tool and not respected as a sentient being, they're unlikely to take that chance. If the powered character is willing to take those risks, ask everyone at the table individually, are you willing to give me control of significant narrative and mechanical consequences? If any player, including you, the GM, does not agree, the group will move in a different direction. When everyone at the table agrees, 3 things will happen. 2 that will affect the game immediately, and 1 that will affect the game long term. First, the GM will take control of the consequences of what happens to the character, removing all choice from the player. The only restrictions to their choices are, of course, the detour list and the safety tools. Anyone at the table may ask the GM to backpedal if the outcome is harmful to them. Second, regardless of how many PT the group spends, the consequences will be beyond those established in the chart on page 70 for 7 PT. In addition, in the long term, if a character is the reason for the powered character's overexertion, either because they need to be saved or because they've convinced the powered character to push their powers, some aspects may change. Good friends are willing to take reasonable risks to help each other, but if you think players aren't doing for the powered character what the powered character is doing for them, shift the relationships between them to more negative ones. This can take the form of either eliminating a positive aspect or adding a negative one. So that's something to consider. I think that's also something, like, sometimes when you're in games and you have like an NPC, sometimes the players don't realize that that NPC also should have their own goals, personalities, fears, trials, tribulations themselves. And when you are displaying a certain type of behavior to that NPC, they could and should react accordingly. So like, if you're trying to deceive an NPC and they know that you're trying to deceive you, they should not trust you. And you shouldn't be surprised by that either. So if you are trying to only use this character for their power and for your own personal gain, you should not be surprised when their relationship with you takes a negative turn. Which is nice that they include that. Checkpoints for powered characters. Just as players, individually controlled characters will have goals and motivation, the powered character will too. Narratively, the powered character's feelings about the other members of the group will develop over the course of multiple sessions based on players' choices. Beyond the narrative changes, though, there are ways for the powered character to increase their abilities, improving mechanically. These can help you provide a framework for the story. In terms of major changes to the powered character, you should consider when thinking about the powered character what the checkpoints will be for them. These checkpoints should be moments and locations that are both narratively and mechanically significant, places where something triggers a meaningful change in the character. When determining these checkpoints, think about how a big event would influence the character. You should use these checkpoints as the big moments of the game, moments when things change, but not necessarily always for the better. Such checkpoints should be used to complicate the players' lives. Perhaps they meet a key villain who is now aware of them too. When moments, what's important to the character, what's important is that players, even though they'll be pushed toward these character checkpoints, feel a sense of dread as they approach these pivotal moments. The clues that lead the players to these moments will give their experience a structure so that they aren't just fumbling around in the world when they helped create. And they'll also create the edge of your seat, anything could happen moments that make games memorable. And then it talks about what you can do for these checkpoints, including the Powered character has more PT. Powered character gets to roll a dice or some dice for free on checks. The powered character discovers a new ability. Powered character discovers a way to regain PT more quickly, blah, 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 blah. Creating and fighting monsters. In a game like Kids on Bikes, your players are probably going to expect to face something that's both supernatural and wants to kill them. While most of these threats they'll face will come in the form of mundane NPCs, sometimes at some point you'll want your characters to square off against something stranger. In this section, we'll talk about how to create those monsters. When creating a monster to include in your game, there are a few questions you should consider, all of which we'll elaborate on more fully in this section. Why include a monster instead of a mundane threat? What do you expect will be the nature of the monster's threat to the group? What do you expect will be the group's goal with regard to the monster? What will the group monster's stats be? How do you expect the characters to succeed against the monster? How do you expect the players to figure out the monster's weakness? You'll notice expect appears a lot on that list. Remember, whatever plan you have for how things will go with the monster, your players may take things in an unexpected direction. Why include a monster instead of a mundane threat? First, stop and ask yourself if you really want to bring a monster into the game yet. Including a supernatural creature too early can shift the focus of the game. When stories escalate to the monstrous threats, it's hard to come back from that. Something stranger. Stranger Things. Stranger Things with 11 in slots kit. Also, you decide if the time is right for the characters to see the monster, even if you're ready to introduce the idea of the monster. Locking yourself into what the monster really is can constrain how you and your players tell the story. Also, meeting their first monster should feel really climactic for an arc in your character's stories. Having an opening scene where a monster appears sets up expectations for a game being a specific way. So, I think that's important if you're running a longer game, is you don't want to introduce the big bad in like the second episode. What if it's a mimic? Notes. Write that down. Write that down. You don't want to introduce the big bad, specifically a big bad at like their full power in the second episode. Because then it takes away the element of surprise of, well, what are we up against? How do we fight this? What do we do? And you want your players to feel that sort of dread of the unknown. What do you expect will be the nature of the monster's threat to the group? Beyond direct physical confrontation, there are a few ways that a monster could interact with the group. The way that you want the monster to threaten the group will help you determine other details about them. The monster could be searching for something that the characters are also searching for, but uninterested in confronting the characters physically. The monster could be directly hunting the characters, but only willing to attack one of them if one of them is alone. The monster could be simply lost, confused, and misunderstood. That's also another really interesting point that I see a lot of in games is, why is the big bad, why is the monster, why is this big villain doing what they're doing? And it shouldn't just be because they're a little evil guy. Like, you want to have a villain or a monster that is interesting. I feel like if you have a monster that's just evil for the sake of being evil, it's really boring. I want to know their motivations behind doing the things that they're doing, and you could make a character an okay character that's like, oh, they just want to sow chaos, but it's like, why do they want to sow chaos? What happened to them that made them want to be that way? I think thinking about like your villain's motivations is incredibly important to making a very interesting story. What do you expect will be the group's goal with regard to the monster? While this may depend on the choices that your group makes, some intentional thought behind how you expect the characters to try to deal with the monster will help you better design it. Is the monster going to be one that they deal with from afar for now, coping only with the aftermath of its behavior? Will they have moments of interaction with the monster before it disappears again? Do they hope to permanently foil the monster's plans? And if so, will they do that by preventing it from getting what it wants or by destroying the monster entirely? What will the monster stats be? Keeping in mind the answers to the above questions, think about what the monster's stats should be. In short, the more directly they'll be dealing with the monster and the more overtly hostile the monster will be, the closer the monster's stats need to be the character stats, assuming that you want the characters to survive. if you want the characters to survive. So that's basically saying don't make this immortal being if you want the characters to survive. Let's just say a black dragon strikes to a city where players are and they see all the destruction going on can trigger. How the heck are we supposed to defeat that and go on an adventure to find relics or something? See, that's different, I think. So you have like this creature, this beast. I do agree that could be a very interesting story like start point. But then we learn, why did the black dragon, you want to learn, why did the black dragon attack this city? What drew the dragon there? Was there something that called to the dragon? Is there something hidden in the city? Did they find what they were looking for? Because I think that's a much better like starting point than, hey, this black dragon just wanted to like kill a bunch of people and so chaos. You know? What if they don't know the villain is the villain? That's another thing. I love a little like BBG in disguise moment. That is the campaign I'm about to run for the non-role players. Well, if they're not really into the role playing, then I guess that can work. Again, you want to tailor things to what your players want. Characters are going to have each 6 stat dice. Your monster could have D4 and 4 stats and D20 and 2 of them. An especially formidable monster could have nothing below a D10. And there's nothing stopping you from having a monster with 3 D20 for flight. Imagine the look on your player's face if you tell them you need to borrow a few D20s to check. I want to do that as a GM. I have to sneeze. I have to sneeze again. Oh God. Thank you. Thank you, Joel. Thank you. See the black dragon destroy a village. Later, they meet an intriguing NPC who doesn't. It's a black dragon in disguise. I do like that. How would they know? How do you expect the characters to succeed against the monster? Gathering resources, giving the monster what it wants, numerous successes, solving a puzzle, weaken the monster. So I think if like you're playing in like a long haul game, you don't want like, it shouldn't, the characters shouldn't gather everything they need and then defeat the monster in like one session, because that's like boring. It's like you want to give them little things, little hints of stuff to slowly be able to defeat or do whatever their terms are for defeat the creature that they're opposing. I'm just piecing together what y'all are putting down. How do you expect the players to figure out the monster's weakness? Face a smaller monster, get lucky once, read someone else's successes or failures, observe the monster, talk to the monster. So these are all very, like, so you face a smaller monster that is similar to the monster that you're facing. Get lucky once. So they just happen to discover that the monster doesn't like fire. Read someone else's successes or failures. Someone faced this monster before and left notes. So that's also very interesting, is piecing together things from like the past. Observe the monster, just have them just be a little stealthy lookout guys, and talk to the monster. If the monster isn't necessarily hostile towards the characters, what would happen if they just listened to it and tried to communicate with it? Just trying to communicate with me. I feel there's something we said about the callous, destructive creature, but it's for a very specific story and a very specific party of self-righteous characters. The kind of players who are willing to be shown a truly soulless enemy and who will rail against the creature's careless destruction and harm. I agree, Dro. I think it's a very specific thing. For me, if I was a player in a game where the big bad was just evil for the sake of being evil, I don't think I would find pleasure in that. But I know that like I'm not everyone. I know that there are some people who just want to go in and hack and slash, and they just want to power up and gather a bunch of really cool artifacts and really cool weapons in order to defeat the big bad. And that's fine if The great thing about TTRPGs is you can play the TTRPG exactly how you want. You don't have to roleplay. You don't have to care about, you know, characters' motivations and stuff. If all you want to do is just kill the thing. I once played a character in D&D who tried diplomacy with a rampaging... How'd that work out for you, Weasel? Changing the rules. Since we finalized the first rule system, we've published almost 50 adventure prompts, most of which have bent, broken, changed, and even introduced rules. We love that, and we'd be thrilled if you adapted the rules to make something better for your players. The purpose of playing Kids on Bikes is to make sure that everyone has fun. So with that in mind, if there's something that you would like to, that would make it more fun for your group, we encourage you to add, alter, or discard rules to make it the best experience it can be for you and your players. So that's why I wouldn't use the powered character unless it's specifically called for the story. But for the story that I'm wanting to tell in the two-shot we're doing next month, there's no need for me to do a powered character. When you're changing the rules, remember that small changes can have big consequences. While it's not possible to imagine all of the potential ripple effects, try to imagine them. And if you do change something and a clever player figures out an unexpected exploit, or if it otherwise ends up making the game less fun, feel free to ask them to not do that again, and to change the rule back to how it was originally, or to tweak it again. To that end, if you are going to change the rules to the game, make sure that you discuss this with the players. So that's like anytime you have any like house rules, table rules, you want to make sure that those are established. I've done that before. I have a bunch of house rules for D&D, my little homebrew rules that I have that I went over in session 0 with my players to make sure that they were aware of them. And then comes the bard and ruins every plan the DM had. The bard's like, get out, fuck that dragon. Let me fuck that dragon. Playing multiple sessions of Kids on Bikes. We hope that you and your players will enjoy Kids on Bikes enough to play it over multiple sessions, developing and growing your story and the characters. Here are some tools to help you make the campaign of Kids on Bikes as much fun as possible. So stars and wishes, we already went over this. Stars is when you give your star to moments or people or scenes, kind of just showing your appreciation for the people at the table. And wishes is obviously things that you would want to see in the game more. Changes between sessions. If you are playing over multiple sessions, you might decide to end the session's events on a cliffhanger so that the characters can pick up at the right where they left off or literally fell off. That's great, and will keep your players anxious about the resolution for one session to the next. If that's how a session ends, ignore the rest of this section for now. If instead at the end of the gameplay you've reached a point where there will be some in-game time between the end of the session and the start of the next, you and your players should work as a group to create a coda for the story. In classical music, a coda is the final portion of the work, one that brings the work to a close. Here, you'll do the same by telling everyone else how the events in the game thus far affect you in the weeks following. So these are things that you can ask your players. What is different for you? Any changes to your bike? What changes in your town? What changes to the powered character? And then it just goes over each one. Can I fuck the damage? Now roll for damage. Roll Constitution. These go over a bunch of things. So have your knacks or bonded actions changed? Any changes to your bike? What changes in your town? What changes for powered character? And this is basically when there are time skips in the game. How do you establish? Because obviously time keeps moving. If you're going to do a time skip, things change. The world keeps turning. So you want to establish any changes that happen both to your character and the world surrounding them when that does happen. Removing characters from your game for any number of reasons. A character may need to be retired from play. It could be that their player is leaving the game or is tired of playing that character. The table as a group must decide that the character should be removed for narrative reasons, like making a story safer or more interesting. No matter the reason, if a player makes the decision to stop playing a character, the choice should be respected. As part of the discussion prior to that character leaving the game, you and the players will discuss the extent to which the former PC will still be in the world of your game. So it basically says when a character has to leave for whatever reason, how do you handle that situation? Do you write them off and never speak of them again? Do you have them ride off into the sunset, live happily ever after? Are they still a part of the world but controlled by the GM? If the leaving PC's player is staying in the game, they might still narrate what the character does and say when they do appear. So if the character does appear again, you could have the original player decide what they want to do, which I think is very fun. it's nice to have that piece of your character still there. I was in a game where our paladin romanced a white dragon out of attacking us. They had wonderful children. Play as a changeling, you can shift to accommodate for sizes. Oh no. Remember, making these decisions should agree collaboratively. Once you've determined who control the character, you and the players will discover that will consider the narrative question: why is that character leaving the group? No matter what you and the players choose, it will shift the game's narrative significantly. Ultimately, all of you will decide what's right for your group. So you can have the character get like arrested. You can have an ongoing fear strike the character from the narrative. If the character has done something so dangerous that they put the whole group at risk, the group as a whole can decide to ostracize them. The parent can be like, hey, no, and then goodbye. Gotta hit the bed. Good night. Thank you for hanging out. Permanent injury. Yeah, so this is just how to write a character out of the narrative without just being like, goodbye. Character death. There is, of course, the option of the character dying. Although the genre is filled with horror, suspense, and risk, death is rarely a consequence for the characters. Many terrible things happen to them, but death seems to be one of the least frequent. In Kids on Bikes, that also holds true. There are boundless ways to hurt a character that don't involve death, such as having them infected with something terrible, having them taken by a lurking evil, or having them be scarred by what they've seen. Beyond the story element, character death can be a horrible experience for a player. To ensure that everyone maintains agency and choice during dire consequences, you and all of the players should have a discussion about what comes next. So this is important. Just discuss with your players whether or not, one, is character death on the table, and two, if you're going to have character death, how are you going to handle it? If you're not going to have character death, what are the consequences? What dire consequences could happen instead? Debriefing required after pivotal sessions. So this basically talks about how you are going to go around the table and ask at least 3 questions, selecting them based on what makes the most sense. And then you have the questions here. What left the biggest impact on you this session? What do you think your character is feeling after the session? What about the story touched you most today? What about the story touched you least today? What upset you the most in this session? What gave you the most hope in this session? What scared you or creeped you out the most in this session? Give everyone time to answer. Make sure people listen to each other and don't talk over or interrupt each other. After you and your players have a chance to discuss their thoughts and feelings, you can move into the standard endgame discussion. A little bit of a bend. And then we get into the adventure. So this is the horror in the house on Hook Hill. So this is a nice little adventure that they give to you to run your players through if you don't have an adventure planned. And here is the little preamble. Ever since you can remember, stories have been told about the old house sitting abandoned on the hill at the edge of the town. All the kids in town speak about Hook Hill in hushed tones, even the teenagers who are supposed to know better. You know, the big kids who frighten everyone who's smaller, younger, or different from them. Yeah, those teenagers. You're not sure what's worse, those big kids or whatever's supposedly haunting the house on Hook Hill. The horror on the house of Hook Hill is a tutorial adventure for kids on bikes. By the end of this adventure, your group will have built a small town, created characters, learned the rules for overcoming challenges using the powered character, and work together to start unraveling a mystery. The last section of the adventure provides some tips on how to continue the story from where this adventure ends and create your own adventures in the town, where the house of Hook Hill is located. So this essentially is, it gives you like a little, you create the town, you play through this adventure, and then it kind of gives you the chance to continue on with the story and the characters. So it goes step by step. I'm not going to go through everything right now. But it gives you, it's broken down into chapters. You have locations, great room, foyer, dining room, the kitchen. Gives you, I like this as well. It gives you, I'm imagining ghosts that you might encounter, so the family member, and then it also gives you like what they would sound like, which is really nice. I think that's a really cool thing to have in a game and in an adventure is, what kind of voice would this character have? And then it goes through all the way. I'm not going to go through all of it, but it's a pretty extensive, it's got a lot in it for a little tutorial adventure. And then we have the GM notes, the GM record sheet, and then we are in the appendices. So the appendices have pre-game form, so your wish list with care list, content warning list, detour list, possible content warnings, and then we have the tropes. So these are basically the character playbooks you can choose from. More senses you can hit on, the more people. Yes, exactly. So you have, I'll just go through a couple of them. Adventurous scout, brilliant mathlete, conspiracy theorist, overeager enthusiast, laid-back slacker, popular kid, overprotective parent, unlikely ally, mysterious transfer, freakazoid, goody-goody silver spoon, seasoned babysitter, stoic professional, young provider. And then we have the strengths, which is, I believe, each character picks 2 strengths. So as you can see, each trope has where you're going to allocate your stats. They have the age that the trope can account for. Some are teen only, some are child only, some are teen and child, some are adult only. It has the suggested bike, and then it also has suggested strengths, flaws, and then 2 questions that you will answer about the character based on the trope. So the strengths are essentially powers that you're able to use as your character, but most of them, like we said earlier, you're going to have to spend an adversity token to activate the strength. So like cool under pressure, you may spend 1 adversity token to take half of your die's value instead of rolling on a snap decision. Intuitive may spend 1 adversity token, ask the GM about your surroundings, an NPC or the like. The GM must answer honestly. Rebellious, this is free and available for only teens. Add +3 to rolls to persuade or resist persuasion from kids. Add +3 to rolls to resist persuasion from adults. And then we have a list of flaws. Absent-minded, capricious, cowardly, dogmatic, envious, restless, prejudiced, rambunctious, self-centered, pitying, spoiled, to name a few. And then relationship questions. So this is really interesting because this is what happens in the session 0. You're going to, they have a couple of ways that you can do this, but essentially what you'll do is for each other player character, you're going to answer 2 questions. You're going to answer, well, maybe 3 questions, depending on if you know the other character or not. But these are going to be positive questions. So what do you secretly admire about this character? What about this character makes you happy? What's an aspect of this character's personality you try to use as a model for your own? And then they also have negative questions. What does this character have that you want to take from them? What does this character often do that makes you irrationally angry? You can't forgive this character for something they did. What is it and why can't you? And then you have questions for characters that you don't know. What's a good thing have you heard about this character that you can't believe is true? What do some members of the town seek out in this character? Recently, this character did something great for the town. What was it? Why was it surprising? So basically, you'll go in and you'll answer questions about your party members to help you establish your relationship going into the game and sort of where you are friend-wise. And then we have bonded actions. Bonded actions are you and another player who have an established relationship can choose one of these bonded actions, and you can do them once per session. So here's a couple. We'll do some listing off some examples. Heavy lifters, when making a relevant brawn check together, use either character's roll, then add an additional +3 to that roll. Known location, either character can intuit the location of the other, regardless of how improbable their location is, and regardless of how little information the other has. No look pass. One character may throw the other player an object that they both can easily lift, and the other character can catch it without looking and without making a check. So this is an optional mechanic. You don't have to use these, but I think it is really good if you're having a party that has already established relationships, and it kind of can deepen those relationships by having bonded actions amongst the party members. And then here we have the bikes table. So as you can see, each bike has a color and essentially a feeling associated with that color. So black is intense, blue is trustworthy, gold is flashy, gray is level-headed, green is strong, neon pink is fast, orange is outgoing, purple is decisive, red is ambitious, rusty is tough, silver is noble, and white is confident. And then they all have benefits that you get while riding. them. So if you're riding a black bike, you get a +1 to fight checks. If you're riding a neon pink bike, you get +1 to flight checks, and so on. And then you also get a bike upgrade. So you can get a banana seat, a basket, bell, first aid kit, milk crate, pegs, tassels, 10 speeder, trading cards, pedal powered lights. And again, those give you a benefit while you are riding it. So if you have a banana seat, you can carry a passenger. And if they are a powered character, they regain up to 2 power tokens. If you have a basket, you can reach into the basket and come out with a commonplace item. So if you're looking for an item that you don't have in your backpack, and you have a basket on your bike, your basket has that item. Tassels, you get +1 to all checks while being chased. Pedal powered lights, you get +1 to all checks after dark. And then here we have the aspects for the powered character. We went over a couple of these beforehand. And then this is the character sheet. A nice little blank character sheet. I don't think there's anything after that. Oh, acknowledgements. And that's Kids on Bikes. Wow, we did it. Hooray! Hooray! Woohoo! I'm happy we got through that. I think I understand it so much more now reading through it. I hope you guys are interested in it. I'm really looking forward to running Kids on Bikes. I definitely need to hydrate after talking so much.
Wow.
Wow. I hope you guys enjoyed this little my first rendition of Table Flip. We will be running Kids on Bikes next month. So I believe the 10th and the 24th. Thanks for that. Oh, thank you. Hey, great sweaty. Thanks, Sydney. So you'll be able to see Kids on Bikes in action on this channel. That was very helpful. It changed my view of that system quite a bit. I'm glad. I'm hoping that we'll be able to go through some more systems and we'll get some more people on board with all of these different systems, because there's so many wonderful TTRPGs out there that I think don't get the attention they deserve, just because you have the big contenders like D&D just clouding the way. It's a fun system to run. Not that I would know anything about that. Oh my god, Bashman, we will play Kids on Bikes at GaryCon. Chill the fuck out. Message me about it, okay? FD&D. Hell yeah. A little of mine said that improv is more fun as a DM. Same. But I think that this particular system, I think, makes improv fun for everyone. I think it makes improv fun for the players. It makes improv fun for the DM. It takes a lot off the DM's plate as well. Sorry, it's my standard reaction after the 2024 Player's Handbook came out. That's my standard reaction after I see anything in the news regarding anything that anyone from Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro has said, especially about AI. But yeah, I think this is it's a very easy system, and it's a system where you can take what you want and leave what you don't want. Take what you love, leave what you don't. And I think you can run a game, a very good game, just the basics. If the only thing you do is take the stats, you can run a good game with just using the stat checks. You don't have to take the strengths, you don't have to take the flaws, you don't have to take the fears, you just have stat checks and you just roll through a game with RP and stat checks. I think you could just do that. It just goes one step down from an aggie mob burning down the HQ. I'm with you there. I am with you there. But I'm looking forward to running this game. The game that we're going to be running in October is called Confined. I don't even think I've told my players that yet. It's called Confined. We have Jay, Joel, Bones, and Ad. I'm bringing Ad in to play on my channel. I'm looking forward to it. So it's called Confined. It's going to take place in a residential institution. So the players are going to be exploring an abandoned residential institution, quote unquote. This is very, very heavily based on my own experiences as a teen. So, a group home. Not quite. It's more like a mental institution, but it was called a residential institution. I'm still debating if I want to use the actual name. It's based on a residential institution, quote unquote, that I used to explore a lot as a teen. Me and my friends used to go and explore this abandoned campus. It was a sprawling campus. It had a bunch of dormitories. It had a power plant campus. Is that where you saw the thing? Yes. Yes. That's where I saw the skinless thing, the white thing just standing in the forest staring at us. But yes, this is going to be something heavily based on my own personal experiences. I'm very excited. Yeah, it was a wood booger. I'm very excited. I'm very excited to run it. I'm excited to run my players through it. Yeah, it's terrifying. So you guys can look. I'll let you guys know. This place is called Letchworth Village. That's where I grew up. It was shut down in the late 90s. And this is going to be streamed the 10th and the 24th of October. This is a quote-unquote residential institution that was shut down in the 90s. It ran for a couple of decades. It is a sprawling campus. There's a morgue. There's a big old hospital building, which was one of the frequent hotspots of when me and my friends went. A couple of my friends decided they were going to go sit in the little the coolers. It's a lot. I'm not sure how it is now, but we found records. Like they basically just left a lot of like paperwork and stuff around. So a lot of my friends have had paperwork. They've taken paperwork from the building. You could see there's like beds and stuff that were still there. It has its own Wikipedia entry. They tested the polio vaccine there. That was where the first polio vaccine was tested. They tested it on the residents there. Basically, the residents there were the ill-gotten. They were the ones that basically society turned their backs on. There's a lot of things happened there, and I've heard firsthand experiences from people who had worked there, the awful things that have happened there, and my own personal experiences of going into the buildings and just even being on like the campus area, because I used to take Macy for walks there because it was like had like a walking path that a lot of people used. It's just a really it feels weird. It has a very weird vibe to it. Crazy how all of those places just seem to have everyone get up and leave one day. Yeah, like okay, horrible place, but that's yeah. And I feel like a lot of my adolescence was like shaped by going and exploring the place. Letchworth Village. So I really wanted to incorporate it into a game because it had such a big impact on me and like sort of my belief in the spiritual side of things and ghosts and stuff, because I've had such weird encounters there. So I thought it was only fitting that I incorporate those experiences into a TTRPG game, as one does. But I'm excited to run that. I'm excited to run my players through the horrors that I have lurking in my mind about that place. But right now, we are going to go raid over into Folk and Myth. They have Kato is GMing a cheeky little Vaesen game over there. So we're going to start up that raid. And speaking of Folk and Myth, we will be on Folk and Myth tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific for Vampire the Masquerade, episode 3. And then we'll be back here on Saturday at 11 a.m. Pacific for All We've Lost, which is my D&D 5e homebrew campaign that I've talked about a little bit tonight. Elias, you can make some strong stories using that person. Yes. I always like, you know, when you just like, because I've done a lot of fantasy so far. Jesus. I think I've done a lot of fantasy. So it is really nice being able to kind of do these modern games and draw in like actual my own personal experiences for things. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Thank you for listening to me ramble and go off on my little tangents. I hope you guys are looking forward to the next table flip, which will be in 2 weeks, where we start delving into Mothership. Need a modern fantasy game. Maybe. We'll think about it. But yeah, stick around for the raid, and I will see you guys later. You mean my yapathons, my tangents, my yapathons? Goodbye.